Hello and welcome to episode 69 of 10,000 Stitches podcast, a weekly chit-chat all about the joys of small-scale knitting. My name is Andy, and if you were looking for me on the interwebs, you can find me on Ravelry as Purlbug, P-U-R-L-B-U-G, and you can find my blog at thepurlbug.com. Today is Tuesday, July 4th, so happy Independence Day to my American viewers. And this episode will go live today. I typically don't like to cut it this close with recording, but I have today off of work and things were just busy the past couple days, so I figured, you know what, I'll just record this morning, I'll really quick edit and get it uploaded by this afternoon. So we'll see how this goes. Definitely not something I would want to make a regular thing, obviously, because I usually have to work. But it works, right? It works today. So yeah, lots to talk about today. We'll do sort of the normal format, finished objects, works in progress, what's coming up next, knit along stuff. I have the winner of the last knit along to announce, and then the rules for this next one, question of the week, and then chit chat. So yeah, and my hair is doing some sort of weird funky thing. Yeah, so let's get into it. I have no finished objects this week. I have a half object and then a almost half object, so I guess we'll start with those since those are the closest thing to finished objects. But so I finished up the mitten that I showed you guys last week. Oh shoot, just a sec. I just realized I forgot to turn the autofocus off on the camera because it does crazy things, and so I'd like to turn it off and just manually control it. Anyway, you guys don't care. But yeah, so this is the mitten that I showed last week. This pattern is the CORNWALL spring mittens, I think it is. And the yarns that were used on it are this like very limey green is the hand-dyed yarn that I used that I had started making a flax light out of and then frogged. This red is Deborah Norville Serenity sock yarn. And then this color here, this sort of brown color, is the same hand-dyed yarn that I made my traveling cables mitts out of. So as you can see, this one's done, has a thumb on it. It's even been blocked. It did not come out great. So, right, so this is it on my hand. However, this is where my fingers are. So like, I have a lot of room at the top. And same with the thumb, right? I have a decent amount of room in the thumb. It's mostly just because I was following the pattern exactly. I did it, exactly the same number of repeats as the pattern has. And I was using a little bit bigger needles because I tend to knit very tightly, and for color work that's especially not good. So I'm sure that's part of it. And had I just had my wits about me a little bit more, I would have just left off a row of circles. But yeah, I'm not loving it. Partly because so this pattern is made with an afterthought thumb, so there's no thumb gusset or anything, and I'm not entirely sure I like the fit of that. And I mentioned this when I talked about this last time, but my color work skills are mediocre at best. So this was, just a practice thing, and even with blocking it, it definitely helped a lot. I can show you guys kind of how this looks. It definitely has smoothed out a lot. I mean, it's still a little bit lumpy. Right, so it's still a little bit lumpy and puckery, but I mean, definitely better than it was before I blocked it. So now I know that blocking does a world of good, but yeah, I'm just not loving it. And so I haven't started the second one. I may never do the second one. This might just be, a lonely sort of test thing that I did, because I just don't see myself wearing these that much. Partly because there's some kind of longer floats in here that I just didn't do very well. So whatever, we'll see. But yeah, this one at least is done, and I it's not half bad for my first real stranded colorwork project from start to finish, or piece of colorwork from start to finish. I think it went pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm just not happy with the overall fit of it, but I'm happy with the workmanship for my level of doing things. So that's that one. And then the other sort of half object that I have to show you guys is another mitten. So after I finished this one, I realized that I wanted a pattern that had slightly shorter color chunks, right? So shorter floats. And so I went looking around for a pattern, and I found this pattern that is called not Houndstooth. I keep getting these confused. Herringbone mittens with poms, I think. They have little pom-poms on them. I'm not doing the pom-poms, but it's a pattern that's originally written for, I think, worsted weight yarn. I'm doing it with fingering weight, which just meant, you know, casting on more stitches and doing like an extra repeat or two of the pattern. But yeah, it's this really pretty sort of herringbone design, which I really like. And the yarn that I'm knitting this up in is some hand-dyed yarn that is left over from the broken seed stitch socks that I did forever ago. So it's this green and this very bright like pink kind of color that I think together really look like watermelon. So yeah, this one, I just closed up the top of this morning. As you can see, it still needs a thumb, but it's mostly done. And this one looks a little goofy because I did not quite do the hand decreases at the right rate. I did them every other row instead of every row. And now I know that that looks goofy, but the point being that this one at least fits pretty well. So like if I put it on, the top of my middle finger is right about here, right? So it's a good fit. It's a little tight in terms of like circumference, but I mean, for a mitten, that's fine because mostly when I wear mittens, I just have my hands in my pockets anyway. So, you know, and it's pretty warm. So, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with it so far. I probably will try and do this thumb today. This thumb, as you can see, has a thumb gusset that goes with it, so it's just a lot better fit. And the nice thing about this one, so when I've done thumb gussets before, I've usually done them sort of starting on the palm side of the hand, whereas this one comes straight out from either side, and it's really nice because that means that it fits either hand equally well, which is really nice. The pattern is not exactly like reversible, I guess, if that makes sense. Like I'm going to make them the same, but like they won't look the same when they're worn, but that's fine. I don't really care. But yeah, so I'm really happy with this. It's actually quite warm, so I don't want to be wearing it for too long. But yeah, so these yarns are a 75-25 BFL nylon blend. And so they're just a little bit rougher than the like merino that I used for this one. And I just think that these lend themselves to color work just a little bit better. You know, even though they're superwash, they're not super slick and smooth. And I just think it's definitely been helping my color work a little bit. So yeah, that's that. Yeah, not much to it. And so I am going to reverse the colors on the second one, right? So this cuff will be done in pink instead. On this one, I've been holding the green as the dominant color. So on the other one, I will hold the pink as the dominant color. And if that is something you've never heard of before, welcome to the club. I had no idea about like color dominance when you're doing stranded color work until I really got into it, and then I did some reading on it. So I will make sure to link like a blog post or something about color dominance. But it turns out that depending on how you hold your yarn will determine which color really pops out of your pattern. And so on this one, the green seems to pop a little bit more than the pink. Right, it really seems like the green is popping out and the pink is sort of receding into the background. And that's that whole color dominance thing. So, so yeah, I'm going to reverse it on the other one, and that will just be, you know, a little bit of fun and make them a little bit different, but still pretty much the same. So that's that. And yeah, oh, sorry, and I'm knitting these on a US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter needle. Same for this, US 1.5, 2.5 millimeter needle. Okay, so that's the two sort of half object-y things. So now let's talk about my other work in progress, which is, it's hard to say how far it is along because it's a shawl, right? And so the thing with shawls is that unless you're crazy and you cast on all like however many edge stitches all at once, right? Your rows get longer and longer and longer as you go along. So, you know, you may have, it's just weird to gauge where you are in it. And this one especially, this is a bias shawl, and so it's especially kind of hard to figure out like how much more yarn am I going to use on this. But this pattern is what I've been working on at work. I had mentioned last week that my next work project was going to be the perianth, which I was going to make with that beautiful sock blank. And I actually started that, and it was just not working out. I think I didn't have the right size needle, and once I actually got into the pattern, I realized that there were short rows and things like that in it, and that is just not the mindless knitting that I wanted at work. So I decided to not do that, and I'll talk I also was delayed on it a little bit because of an issue with the yarn, which I'll talk about in just a second. But so instead, I've been working on this project at work, which is this sort of scrappy bias shawl. And, you know, it kind of runs on the same principles as all of these bias garter stitch shawls, in that, you know, on every row, on one side, you increase every row. And then on the other side, you decrease every other row, right? That's the basic formula for getting one of these shawls, right? So you cast on like 5 stitches and then you pick a side, right? And on that side, you always increase on every single row. And then on the other side, on every other row, you decrease. Boom, done. And so this one, the sort of pattern that I'm using, I think it said to go until you have 200 stitches on your needle, then bind off. So that's kind of the rough number that I'm looking for. And I forget, I think I maybe have like 140 or 150 stitches right now. But of course, you know, the rows are so long. But let's show you what I'm working on. So this is the shawl. I'm trying to think of a good way to hold this so you can actually see it. So this is what it looks like. So yeah, so it's very scrappy, very squishy because it's all garter stitch, very mindless because it's all garter stitch. And you know, because you're doing things on every row and then every other row, you don't really even have to think about that, you just keep going. So this is mostly just to use up a whole bunch of sock yarn leftovers because, you know, I wind up with like these little, you know, couple gram balls or 5 gram balls, you know, even up to 10 gram balls, where it's like, it's not enough to really do anything with. And yet I don't want to get rid of them because, you know, I like the yarn and I'm like, oh, I'll find a use for it someday. Well, so this is my use for it, right? So kind of starting at the end. So this is where I cast on. And at this side, I was using the very smallest balls that I have because of course the rows are shorter. So I'm going to get more rows out of a smaller ball. So I started with leftover yarn from my speckly socks that I made. This is PhD yarns in their Quantum Dots colorway. This is the sort of robin zig colorway that I dyed up and then made socks for my little brother's lady friend. This is Knit Picks Felici in the Time Traveler colorway. This is leftover yarn from my poly sweater. This is leftover yarn from my Viking socks that I made forever ago. It's Cascade yarns. This is leftover yarn from the cat hat that I made Wesley's mother. This is another thin little stripe of that robin's egg yarn. This is more Knit Picks Felici. Leftover yarn from my blueberry waffle socks with the Highland twist. I think I called them my Cloudy Day socks. More Knit Picks Felici. More of that Quantum Dots colorway. And then this is, oh, what did I make with these? Oh my gosh, they're Game of Thrones inspired. I cannot for the life of me remember what they are called, but they are a pair of socks that I made forever ago, and I was trying out a garter stitch Fish Lips Kiss heel on them, and it didn't quite work out well for me, so I gave them to a friend of mine. But it's this orange Cascade Heritage. So yeah, it's growing. It's been really, really fun. And you know, this is a really great way too to use up your like leftover Felici because you get these stripes and it looks very nice and scrappy, but that's just the yarn striping, right? So a lot fewer ends to weave in than if I had done each of these stripes individually. But as you can see, I do have a lot of ends to weave in. And I'm not entirely sure, I'm gonna need to look up like the best way to weave in ends on garter stitch, but I'm just gonna kind of leave them all and do them all at the end. But yeah, right now I'm really loving it. And I'm super excited for when it will be done because I think it will just be a really fun sort of thing to wear. And you know, it has all these memories in it for me. And like, I can look at each yarn and think like, oh, that's what I made with that. And I just think it'll be a ton of fun. So that's what I've been working on at work. And you know, like I said, I'm a decent way into it, but of course the rows just take longer and longer. So who knows when I'll finish it. But that's that. And then, so then let's get into what's coming up next. So I mentioned my sock blank, so let's get back to the sock blank because that relates to what's coming up next. So something I just like didn't really think about with the sock blank was that it was going to unwind all kinked up as if it was, you know, had already been knit, which of course it had. And So when I first went to start the perianth, I decided that I didn't want to leave it in sock blank form. I wanted to unravel it and roll it all up into a ball, because knitting from a sock blank I think is just too much tension because you have to pull harder to get it to undo. I don't know. This is my first sock blank, so it's all kind of new to me. But so I unraveled all of it, rolled it up into a ball just by hand, which was a heck of a lot easier with a sock blank because, I don't have to put it across a chair and do all that stuff. But then I started knitting with it, and I was using a US 7, I think, which is slightly bigger than the pattern called for. But what I realized as I started knitting was that the yarn had been knit at a tighter gauge than what I was currently knitting it at. And so the fact that it was all kinked up was really making my knitting not look very good and really kind of messing with my tension in a way that I think it probably would not have had I been, knitting socks, which of course would have been knit at a tighter gauge. So I realized okay, I need to take it home. I need to give it a bath. Plus, like I said, I wasn't loving the perianth because it has short rows in it, and I just don't want to deal with that, as kind of a mindless thing to knit on at work. So I brought it home, I gave it a bath. This is what it looks like now, kind of wound up into a very loose skein. You can see that I still did not manage to, it's floppy. I did not quite manage to get all of the kinks out of it. But, it's definitely better than it was, so, we'll go with it. I'm not as concerned about it. I mostly just wanted to relax it a little bit. I'm sure that it would have been a lot better had I soaked it in warm water, but I soaked it in cold water, so what can you do? But yeah, so that's this, and it smells really nice because I used wool wash on it, and it smells delightful, and it's so squishy. Anyway, so I think what I'm going to do with this is as soon as I finish that Scrappy shawl, which I forgot to mention, is using my US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter needle, I think. So as soon as I get that off that needle, I'm going to use the same needle, and I'm going to knit sort of another triangular, or not triangular, like garter stitch sort of shawl. It's not bias, but it's also not like a triangular shawl. To explain what I mean, I made a tiny swatch shawl, and so this basically is what it's going to look like. It's uneven because I was testing how often I wanted to do the increases and decreases. So this side was me changing my stitch count every row, or not every row, every other row, versus this side was every fourth row, right? So basically every garter ridge versus every other garter ridge. And I definitely think I prefer this side because I like the sort of slower, smaller angle that it makes. And so this is based loosely off the tailwind, and I say that only because it has this I-cord edging on the top. That's the only part that really comes from the tailwind because I just could not for the life of me remember exactly how to do it. But you can see it sort of has this I-cord edging at the very top. And I didn't like the I-cord edging on the tailwind because, that's another bias shawl. And so you do the I-cord edging along one of these sort of diagonal sides, if that makes sense, as you're knitting it. And then you do an I-cord bind off along the other diagonal side. So basically with the tailwind, you have your I-cord along these edges versus I did it along this top edge. And I feel like with the bias shawls, having the I-cord knitting along that diagonal edge just doesn't look good because it's tighter than the rest of the knitting and it pulls it weird, and I didn't love it. However, having it along the top here doesn't seem to distort the shape of the shawl at all, and it gives you this nice finished edge along the top, and so I really like that. And so I think I'm going to basically make sort of a long, sort of triangular-ish shawl using this, which I think will be really pretty because, it'll kind of change colors as it goes along, and I think it'll really, really make this yarn look very nice. So that's going to be my work project after I get done with that other shawl. And it's not like this one really takes a whole lot more thought because the I-cord edging is pretty automatic once you kind of get into the rhythm of it, and so it's just a matter of, making sure that you don't increase or decrease too often. But even if you screw up once or twice, it's not like it's going to make a huge difference. Plus, I'm really just loving squishy garter stitch shawls right now. They are just giving me life right now. So I think that will be a really nice one to do. So that's going to be one of the things that's coming up next. And then another thing that I just today decided I totally need in my knitting life is actually something that I first saw a long, long time ago. And it's a pattern that I saw first knit by Mina of the Knitting Expat, and it's a Viajante. And I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. I know it's pronounced, it's a Portuguese word and it's pronounced differently in Portuguese. I don't know Portuguese, and I know just enough about Portuguese to know that they pronounce some letters or some letter combinations very differently than what you would think if you maybe have learned Spanish before. And so all I know about Portuguese is I can't pronounce Portuguese words. So I'm going to pronounce it Viajante, because based on what I know of German and Spanish, that's what comes out. So that's what you're going to get. But basically it is this very long tubular triangular shawl. And I will try and like put in a picture here so you guys, or maybe one or two pictures from the project page the designer took, so you guys can kind of see what it looks like. But it's really cool because it's just this giant triangular shawl, and so you can either wear it the same way that you would normally wear a triangular shawl, and it's just this big squishy thing, or because it's kind of knit in a tube, you can also wear it sort of as like a poncho, which is what I really love about it. And so I just, I look at it and I'm like, yes, this perfectly fits in with this sort of vision that I have of my wardrobe, where, which is a whole nother story. I need to redo my wardrobe, but like it perfectly fits in with this sort of vision that I have of my wardrobe. So I think that's probably going to be the next thing I do, maybe at home, because it's a very large project. Like it's a sweater scale project. It just doesn't have all the fiddly bits of a sweater, but I mean, it's a big project. Like I think it calls for 300 grams of yarn. So like it's a big project. And the pattern calls for lace weight yarn. I don't have any lace weight yarn, so I'm just not gonna use lace weight yarn because I don't have any, and I don't have an easy way to get some because we are still carless. But I have plenty of fingering weight yarn, right? So I'll just do it in fingering weight. If it turns out bigger, I'm sure that won't be a big deal. Either I'll just, end it early, or I'll just make it gigantic, because the lucky thing about me being very, very tall is that if it turns out really long, it's not that big of a deal, right? Because things, always shrink on me, right? So I can definitely make it a little bit longer and it's not as big of a deal. So I kind of decided this morning, like I said. So I was kind of like looking through my stash to figure out like, okay, well maybe do I have yarn that I could make it with, or should I dye up some yarn? Because I have plenty of bare yarn that I could dye up. And, I was kind of like thinking like, well, maybe I'll do it, with a couple of, because I just realized I have 3 skeins of that Cascade Heritage Silk, which are all the same color. So I do have a couple skeins that are all the same color, but I'm not sure that I really want it. Those are kind of a tan color, and I'm not really sure I want it to be tan because I feel like that will be too close to my skin tone and it'll just look weird. So, before that, I was trying to think like, okay, do I have 3 skeins that are different colors but could go together? And so then I started thinking about like a find your fade kind of thing, and I picked out these 3 skeins from my stash. And I was kind of like, oh, well maybe I could do sort of these 3, but I'm not sold on it. And I kind of showed it to Wesley because he tends to be a very good like moderating voice in my fashion choices, because he's a very sort of stylish person himself, but tends to be very simple, very plain, and meticulously detailed. And so I showed him these and he was like, because I had also showed him the pattern pictures, and he said that he thought it would look much better if it was just one solid color. And I kind of agree. So I think probably this afternoon I will get some yarn dyed up, like 3 skeins or so of yarn dyed up for it. I'm not entirely sure what color I'm gonna do yet. I'm thinking maybe like a deep blue. I think that will or like a bluish indigo color. I think that will look pretty good. But who knows? We'll see. I don't really want to do anything red. So I'm thinking like a deep blue or green or something like that. But we'll see. I'm sure I'll have it to show you guys next week. But yeah, that's sort of what's coming up next. And I will probably get that one started. I mean, obviously I'll have to get the yarn dyed up, and then it will need time to dry and all of that stuff. So in that time, I will probably finish the other mitten of that pair that I'm working on, and then I'll get it started probably next weekend or so is probably my thought. So that's what's coming up next. And now let's talk knit along stuff. So as promised, I have the winner of the previous knit along to announce. And I will definitely shoot you a message on Ravelry probably as soon as I get done recording. So depending on how often you check your Ravelry messages, you might see that before you see this episode, who knows. But so we had 42, I think, total entries, which is great. And the winner was entry number 16, and her Ravelry name is Unusually, and I think her real first name is ELLI. So congrats, yay! And her socks that won, like I said, they're entry number 16 on the thread. And oh my goodness, are they pink. I'm actually just going to re-look at them right now to make sure that because she mentioned what the pattern name was, and I want to check that out. So she said, so they're the slippery slope socks pattern. But anyway, super pink. So congrats. And what's kind of cool is, at least according to her Ravelry profile, she lives in Australia, which is crazy to think that yarn that I dyed is going to make its way all the way to Australia. Like, that is mind-blowing for me. So that's super exciting. So yeah, like I said, I will shoot you a message on Ravelry and let me know your address so that I can get that out in the mail to you, because I'm sure it's going to take probably forever to get to Australia because, there's a whole big ocean in between. But yeah, that's super exciting. So yay. And then, so the next knit along. So the next knit along is actually our 10th knit along that we've been doing since I started this podcast, which mind-blowing to me. So maybe I'll have to figure out something special to do for this one. Like maybe I'll pick 2 winners. I don't know. But that is crazy to think that we're on knit along number 10. And this one is green and lace, right? So the color theme is green. The technique theme is lace. So I definitely feel like this opens it back up. I feel like the last knit along was a little bit restrictive in terms of the technique theme, which now I know. But I mean, lace, there's lots of lace things. You can obviously do socks, you can do hats, mitts, lots of like small shawls have like lace portions in them. So yeah, I've just started the thread for that before I started recording. So the threads are up and I put in a couple of patterns just as sort of inspiration. But of course, if you find a pattern that you think works really well, pop it in the chatter thread so everyone else can see it. The rules are pretty much the same as per the usual. Let's see, it needs to fit one of the themes or both if you're ambitious. No whips allowed, so it needs to have been started and finished between July 1st and August 31st. Like I said, the cowl will end on August 31st, and has to be small scale projects, right? So it needs to be between 50 and 150 grams worth of yarn. Beyond that, any pattern category, any yarn weight is totally welcome. Crochet is totally welcome. I guess weaving is welcome too if you are a weaver. I don't know. I've been seeing some weaving stuff on Ravelry lately, so if you weave and it's green, I guess, feel free to submit. I don't know if you can weave lace, but yeah. But yeah, I think those are the rules. Those are the usual rules. So like I said, I put the threads up, so feel free to pop into the chatter thread and, post progress pictures. And then when you finish, pop them in the finished object thread. So yeah, yay. So yeah, I think that's that. So then all we have left is question of the week, which I got some really great responses to question of the week last week, which was, what is something new you have tried lately? My question of the week this week is definitely more just like general life related, and it's sort of another one of those ones that comes from something that's happened to me recently, and so I'm going to ask you guys about it. But I had this really horrible dream last night. Like, not horrible, like scary, but just like really sad. And in the dream, my dad died, which was really weird. And it was very like ambiguous. Like, how did he die? Like, it wasn't quite sure how he died. And it was very weird. But it was like super realistic in another way, because like, I knew that I was going to be recording this podcast in real life this morning. So in my dream, I was like, oh, well, I guess maybe I'll have to like put up a note saying I'm not going to record today because my dad died, right? So it was just really weird. But then it got me thinking about dreams, right? Because the way I look at dreams, like I don't attribute a lot of meaning to dreams because they're just neurons firing in your brain while you're asleep trying to like parse information. And a lot of sort of what we attribute as meaning to them, I I think they've shown that like that comes after you wake up, right? Like when you're asleep, there is nothing. Like it's just random pictures. It's just random brain cells firing. And then when you wake up, you try to put it all into some sort of cohesive storyline. So I don't attribute a lot of meaning to dreams. But my question, I have noticed that I tend to have recurring dreams that happen during different parts of my life. So my question for you guys is, do you ever have recurring dreams? And if so, do you know what causes them? I find that recurring dreams tend to be some of the weirdest ones. And the one that I always have, and it takes different forms, but it's the same general theme all the time, where it's that, it's the dream of I have forgotten to do something until it's too late. Right. And so I used to have these all the time when I was in school, either at the beginning of the semester or at the very end of the semester, where, it's like, oh, it turns out I signed up for a class and then never went. And now the finals today. Oh, no, or when I was younger, like in, middle school or something, it was that I forgot my lunch money, or I forgot where my locker was or something like that. I will also sometimes have dreams where it turns out I'm supposed to be going on a trip, but I haven't packed anything. And then, of course, there's this whole series of hilarious events that keeps you from actually doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, right? So I have those dreams a lot, which I know are just stress related. It's just when I get stressed out, I tend to have those dreams. And so, I can definitely tell when those dreams show up. It's like, okay, we got to just take it down a notch. But my question is, do any of you have those sort of recurring dreams? And if you want to share them, what are they? Obviously don't share them if they're anything too personal, but I don't know. I sometimes think that recurring dreams are the funniest. And I'd be curious to know, does anyone have a positive recurring dream? Or are they all sort of negative or stress related? Because I feel like I've never had a recurring happy dream, or at least not that I remember. But yeah, that's my question of the week this week. So if you were only here for the knitting stuff, that's going to be about it for that. So if that's all you were here for, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. If you want to hear a little bit about my life, hang around and we'll do some chit chat. Once again, I apologize about the slight change in perspective for the chatter section. I just sat down because, again, I'm recording right after going for a run, or coming back from a run. So I'm tired. But I guess that's part of my chit chat is I have been trying to exercise more lately. I had been really bad about getting exercise, and I think need to cancel my gym membership at the gym on campus because I never go. And yeah, it's only $10 a paycheck, and it gets taken out automatically from my paycheck. But, if I think about it, I could be taking that $10 every paycheck and putting it into an envelope and using it for, new running shoes when I need those. But anyway, so I have been running more lately because running, it turns out, it was always something I thought I didn't like, right? I used to run a lot when I was younger. When I was in undergrad, I ran a lot, and I actually even ran a half marathon, my junior or senior year of undergrad. But the problem is I'm a horrendously slow runner. And when I ran that half marathon, I actually had an average pace of, I think, 12 and a half minutes a mile, which is only slightly faster than walking. But, so I always, thought I didn't like running. And I really hate running at the gym on a treadmill, because it's the ultimate hamster wheel. And I just don't like that. But I do enjoy running outside. And what I have found makes running outside even more enjoyable is if I don't get neurotic about the numbers, right? So I used to always take my phone with me, partly from a safety standpoint, and then partly because I would use the Nike Plus, I think, training, or the Nike Plus running app, which would track your run. And I find that I don't like doing that. I thought I liked having the numbers. It turns out I really don't. And so lately I've been just not taking anything with me. I take my apartment key, obviously, so I can get back in. But I don't take my phone. I don't, wear a watch or anything. I just go and I run free like the wind. And of course there is, I guess there's maybe a little bit of a worry about safety, but at the same time, I always run in very well-populated areas where there's lots of people, and I'm not super concerned about it. And I also always tell Wesley where I'm going before I go, so that if it's been 2 hours and I'm not back or something, he kind of knows where to start looking. But I find that not tracking it and just going out and going on a run makes me so much happier, right? Because then if I'm being slow, it's fine. I don't see the numbers, so it doesn't really matter. How do I know that I ran slower today than the other day? Or conversely, how do I know that I ran faster today than the other day? And then I always need to run this fast. It's just like, well, I'm just gonna run as fast and as far today as I feel like running. And of course I have some general idea of the distances because, I run, sort of around my apartment, and I know that like, oh well, if I run from my apartment to sort of like where my office is and back, that's roughly 2 miles. Or if I run to this street and back, that's 3 miles or whatever, roughly. So I kind of have this idea, but at the same time, like, it's very freeing to not know the exact numbers and times. So yeah, that's something I've been doing lately, and I'm trying to get into doing it on weekdays more because I have no problem running on the weekends, but on weekdays it definitely gets tougher. And so I went this morning because obviously I have today off, and I'm gonna try and do maybe like Tuesday, Thursday during the week, and we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and who knows, maybe eventually I will not be so slow. But so that's one thing that's been going on in my life. Another thing that I really wanted to share with you guys that's super exciting. So I showed you my plant last week that had lost all of its leaves, my croton, which I was calling baby Groot. And last week when I showed you guys, it had, it has like little buds on it, but they were just like these little green nubbins. It has a leaf coming in now. So let's see if I can get this focused on that. So there you can see that little leafy guy. Super exciting. So I have high hopes that it's coming back. I've been making sure to, give it lots of water and lots of sunlight, and I think it's going to come back. So I'm really excited. So now the one that's driving me nuts is, I'll show you another one of my plants that's right here. So now the one that's driving me nuts is my string of pearls, which I think I got it the same day as I got the croton. So again, it came from, a greenhouse that I know and respect pretty well, and I know they have good plants. And it was doing really well. Like, it was, really flourishing. It was putting off, new little tendrils. And it was great. And then all of a sudden, like, half of it died. And I don't know what happened to it. I didn't move it or anything. Like, it was in the same spot that it always was. And then a bunch of it started dying. And so then I moved it into this room, because originally it was in our living room. But it wasn't getting a lot of light, and so then I moved it in here so it could get more light. I don't know. The weird thing is parts of it seem to be growing, and then parts of it seem to be completely dying. So I don't know. I've been trying to, make sure it gets plenty of light and gets water when it needs it, but it's driving me nuts, and I'm hoping that it comes back. But I don't know if you guys will be able to see it very well. So when I first got it, and of course I don't want to tilt it too much because it will sprinkle dirt everywhere. So when I first got it, like, this whole top of the pot was like covered in these little balls. So this is why it's called string of pearls, is because it has these little balls on it. And so you can see, like, it's maybe half covered now. So a lot of it has sort of died, and I don't know why. But then again, at the same time, like, you can see that little bit there, like, that's all new growth. So if anyone's an expert on these, let me know what's going on, because everything I read said that they're super easy plants to take care of. They just grow like weeds. And that was the impression that I had of it at first, was that it was growing so well. And I don't know what's happened to it, but I'm just going to hold out hope that it will come back. And I don't know. Maybe I gave it a little bit too much water one time. I don't know. But it's weird because it's like what I noticed happening was, like, right, so it had all these like healthy little balls on it. And then, like, the ones that died turned, they're this nice, bright, healthy green, and then they turn like this really dark green, and then they turn black and sort of withered away. And you can actually even see, I don't know if I'll be able to get this so you guys can see this or not. But you can actually see right here, there's one that's in the process of dying. So I don't know, man. These houseplants, right? I just want them to thrive, and they're doing, some of them are doing really well, and some of them are just not doing so well. But anyway, oh dear. Apparently our hard drive is almost full. Go figure. Hopefully it'll have enough for me to finish up. But actually, wait, I'm going to pause and delete some old stuff so that I don't wind up losing everything. So I'll be right back. Yep, I was totally out of hard drive space. I keep forgetting the hard drive we have is only a 250 gig hard drive because it's a solid state and they get expensive really fast. And so it's only a 250 gig hard drive, which when you're recording at the max resolution that my camera records at, fills up really fast. So I guess I need to be better about deleting old things. But problem solved for right now, at least. Yeah, so I was talking about plants. So what else have I been up to? Otherwise, like I said, we still don't have the car back, so I haven't really been up to much other than just, going to work. Yeah, this past weekend we did wind up going with some friends up to King's Dominion, which was a lot of fun. Obviously we rode with our friend, but it was really fun because this friend of ours, she was actually one of Wesley's classmates in the master's program, and she's gonna be moving to, I think, DC soon because she's starting her PhD up at a school up there. So it gives me another reason to visit DC, which is great. But she's super fun and we really like her. And her husband is from, I forget exactly where, and so I'm not even gonna try. Not here. He's not from the US. And so he had never ridden a roller coaster until he was an adult. And he hates roller coasters, really hates roller coasters, just does not enjoy them at all. So he doesn't mind going up to King's Dominion, but he won't ride anything with us. Or at least there's very few things he wants to ride. So, but I mean, really nice guy. Love it when he comes along because he's super nice. But, it's kind of a bummer when, you have a group of 4 people, but only 3 want to ride things. Like that just, odd numbers at theme parks screws everything up. So, originally he was supposed to be coming with us, but then I guess he got really, really sick. He ate something that didn't agree with him. So he couldn't come with us. But we also had another friend who was going to be coming with us, who also not from here. I think he's from Nepal. I can say that with pretty good certainty. But he's another one of Wesley's classmates. Really nice guy. Again, had never ridden a roller coaster before. Never in his life had ridden a roller coaster before. And so, again, it was kind of, I feel like people who haven't ridden roller coasters until they're adults, either they love them or they absolutely hate them, right? There's not a lot of people who make it into adulthood without having ridden a roller coaster who just feel kind of meh about it. Like you're usually on one of either end. Luckily, this guy loved it. Like it just made the whole day so much fun because he just wanted to ride everything and, really had a great time, just loved it to death. And so that was just super fun. We spent maybe 2 or 3 hours up there. It was really hot. So we went on Saturday, I think it was, and it was super hot. And we went later in the day, which helped because it wasn't as busy, but I mean, it was still just unreasonably hot. So we basically went as long as we could hold out in the heat before we were like, okay, we got to go home. And, just wound up completely exhausted. I think by the time we got home, it was close to like 8 o'clock at night. And of course we hadn't eaten dinner yet. So we went and got like a frozen pizza and popped in a frozen pizza, which I mean was really tasty, but I think we went to bed at like 9 o'clock and slept in until like 8 o'clock the next morning. Like just stupid late for me and Wesley, who usually wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, but it was a ton of fun and I really enjoyed it. But it was part of why like I didn't have any energy on Sunday because I was still just sort of recovering from that. So that's why I didn't record Sunday. And then yesterday I had to go to work and everything. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then the only other interesting thing I've done lately is last night I made a cream of chicken soup for the first time from scratch, which may not sound like much, but remember, I'm gluten-free, right? So that makes everything harder. And one of the dishes that Wesley and I really like, that's kind of like one of our go-tos for when we're not feeling very creative, is tater tot hot dish. Which, if you've never had it before, is basically where you take ground beef and you mix it with like cream of chicken or cream of mushroom, some sort of creamy soup. And then you throw in whatever vegetables you have. So for us, that's usually shredded carrots that we have left over from other stuff and like frozen green beans. And I used to put in corn, but now corn makes me really sick, so I don't put that in anymore. Some onion. If it was just me, I would put in peas, but Wesley doesn't like peas. So, typically it's like onion and carrots and frozen green beans. But I mean, you can put in anything, like whatever you have in your fridge, just throw it in there. And you mix that all up. You obviously cook the beef first. You mix it all up with that creamy soup. You put it in a casserole dish, and then you cover the top with tater tots. Or we actually really like using the tater coins, which are like tater tots, but they're like flatter because they just brown up faster. And so, you cover the top with tater tots, you put the whole thing in the oven, and you basically just cook it until the tater tots are nice and crispy. And then you put cheese on top of it and you melt the cheese, and then it's just delicious. Like it's sort of like a hamburger, like casserole sort of. And we usually put ketchup and stuff on top, but you could put hot sauce on it. But anyway, the important part of this whole dish is this cream-based soup, because if you don't have cream-based soup in it, you kind of have like a shepherd's pie, I guess. But it's not like, having that creamy soup to kind of pull everything together really is what makes it, the hot dish. And so, which was fine because our grocery store that's nearest to us for the longest time carried a gluten-free cream of chicken soup, right? It came in this weird, like, little box sort of thing. And it was kind of expensive, but whatever, right? Like, you only need one box, to make the dish, so it was fine. And then they just stopped carrying it. I don't know why they just stopped carrying it. Like, they stopped carrying a whole bunch of these, like, organic gluten-free soups. And I don't know why. I guess maybe they didn't sell very well, but I've been really sad because, I have a couple of dishes that I make that kind of rely on that cream-based soup to be the base of the dish. And without it, I can't make them anymore, especially including the tater tot hot dish, which is one of our favorites. And so I had been looking online for recipes on how to make a cream-based soup, a gluten-free cream-based soup. And basically what you have to do is you have to make a roux using like rice flour, and then, you put in your milk and your chicken broth, and then you thicken it up and it becomes a cream-based soup. So I did that for the first time last night, totally expecting it to not work very well, and it actually worked really well. It actually got a little bit too thick, I think, because, right, so you make this roux, which is basically you mix equal parts butter and flour, in my case rice flour, and you kind of cook it, cook the flour just a little bit in the butter, and then you dump in your liquid, and then you kind of bring it to a boil, and it will thicken up, right? And you pull it off whenever it's your desired thickness. So ours went from being not thick enough to being like, whoa, crazy thick, like just like that. Like I sort of, had been stirring it, and then I went to stir the beef, which was in the pan next to it, and then I went back to it, and it was real thick. So next time I'll definitely have to keep a closer watch on it and not quite let it thicken up so much. But I mean, it still worked fine, and it created a good casserole. So that was something really exciting that, now I know I can do it, and I can do it for cheaper than, what the box stuff costs, and I know exactly what's in it, right? Because it's just, butter and flour and milk and chicken broth and seasoning, basically. So that's really exciting, and it was, kind of a nice thing to be like, yeah, I did that. Look at me doing things myself, like sort of one of those pioneer woman moments where it was like, yeah, I can do this for myself. That's really nice. So yeah, that's been what we've been up to, but hopefully my chit chat stuff will get more exciting soon. I don't know. Hopefully we'll get the car back soon. It's been just about 2 months now since it got hit, and it's driving us nuts that it's taking so long at this body shop. And what's really annoying is it's not necessarily the body shop we would have wanted it taken to, but we were kind of under the impression that like, oh, if we take it to this one, it'll be faster, but it turns out it had, whatever. It's just really annoying, but Wesley's going to call them again tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have it back soon. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. I'm going to try and get this edited and uploaded before it gets to be too late in the day. But yeah, have a good 4th of July. Be safe. Don't blow your hands off with fireworks. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.